The silent stranger in the back row. The old wooden clock ticked slowly above the whiteboard, each second stretching like an eternity. The classroom smelled of chalk and forgotten dreams. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, and the students sat hunched in their chairs, eyes glazed, waiting for the bell to release them from the prison of another long day. But today was different. A man sat at the back of the classroom. He didn't belong. His posture was too calm, his face too familiar, his presence too powerful to ignore. Some students whispered, nudging each other, eyes darting toward the back. Was that really him? Yes, it was. Keanu Reeves. He wore a plain gray hoodie, dark jeans, and carried nothing but a quiet, almost invisible energy. He looked like a ghost who had wandered into the wrong place. Yet somehow, he looked perfectly at home among the confused, tired students. No one knew why he was there, not yet. At the front of the room, Mr. Cole, the physics teacher, clicked his marker furiously against the whiteboard. He was in his late 50s, tall, lean, and sharp-eyed. He was known for being strict, cold, and obsessed with logic. Emotion had no place in his classroom. Dreams didn't matter, only results. He didn't like distractions. And Keanu Reeves was a distraction. Mr. Cole cleared his throat and turned to face the class. "Since we have a guest," he said, his voice stiff, "perhaps he'd like to contribute." The room froze. Some students laughed nervously. A few pulled out their phones, secretly recording. No one could believe what was happening. Keanu didn't respond at first. He just looked at Mr. Cole, his face unreadable. "Well?" the teacher pushed. "Do you know anything about physics, Mr. Reeves? Or do you only pretend to in movies?" There was a moment of silence so heavy it felt like gravity had doubled. Then Keanu stood up. He walked slowly to the front of the class, each step quiet, deliberate. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't smile or frown. He just picked up the marker from Mr. Cole's hand and turned to the board. He didn't say anything. Instead, he drew a single line, an equation. It started simple. F Pawadanias May. Then, slowly, with graceful movements, he expanded it. Symbols, variables, concepts, each one layered on the last. It wasn't just math, it was art. The board filled with formulas no one in that classroom had seen before. Students leaned forward in their seats. Mr. Cole squinted, unsure. Keanu stepped aside and faced the class. "This," he said softly, pointing at the board, "is not just an equation. It's a story. It's a way of seeing the world." The students were silent, listening, drawn in like moths to a quiet flame. "Most people look at a falling apple and think nothing of it," Keanu continued. "But someone once saw that apple and asked why. That question changed the world." His voice wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it carried something rare: sincerity. "And sometimes," he added, "questions matter more than answers." Mr. Cole walked up to the board and examined the equation more closely. His brow furrowed. He looked again, and again. It was correct. Not only correct, but elegantly constructed. The type of derivation only a true thinker could build. "How?" Mr. Cole started, but the words didn't come. Keanu walked back to his seat. No one spoke. The bell rang, but no one moved. The day before, 24 hours earlier, Keanu Reeves sat alone in a small coffee shop on the edge of town. He wore sunglasses and a baseball cap, doing his best to blend in. He sipped his coffee slowly, watching the world go by. He had come here for a reason. It wasn't for a movie. It wasn't for fame. It was something else. Something personal. A few weeks ago, he had received a letter, handwritten, no name, no return address. It said, "My son wants to quit school. He believes he's worthless because he struggles in math. He idolizes you. If you could just visit his class for one day, you might save his future." Keanu didn't know who sent it, but something about the letter touched him. Maybe it was the handwriting. Maybe it was the quiet desperation between the lines. Maybe it reminded him of his own past. He had never liked school either. Not because he was lazy, because he didn't fit. As a child, Keanu struggled with dyslexia. Numbers danced on the page. Letters refused to stay still. Teachers thought he was slow. Classmates mocked him. He remembered the feeling of being overlooked, dismissed. And yet in quiet corners of the library, he discovered science. Not the cold, mechanical kind, but the wonder in it, the poetry, the endless search for why. And now, sitting in this coffee shop decades later, he felt that same calling again. So he went, not as a celebrity, as a human being, as someone who once sat at the back of a class, lost and alone, waiting for someone to notice. Back in class after the bell, students slowly gathered their things, but their eyes kept flicking back toward Keanu. One student stayed behind. His name was Lucas. A shy, thin boy with thick glasses and a quiet demeanor. He rarely spoke in class. His grades were average, his confidence low. But something in his eyes said he was carrying more than he let on. Excuse me, Lucas said softly, standing near Keanu. Keanu looked up and smiled. How did you know that equation? Lucas asked. Keanu paused. I didn't memorize it, he said. I understood it. Lucas nodded slowly. I want to be smart, he whispered. But I'm not. Keanu leaned forward. You are, he said. You just haven't found your way in yet. Lucas looked confused. Everyone learns differently, Keanu explained. Some people understand by reading, others by doing, others by listening, and some by feeling. The trick isn't to force yourself to learn like everyone else. It's to find the way that works for you. Lucas's eyes shimmered slightly. Thank you, he whispered. Keanu placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You're not alone, he said. You never were. Mr. Cole's reflection after school. Mr. Cole sat alone in the empty classroom, staring at the whiteboard. The equation was still there, untouched. He had spent 30 years teaching. He had prided himself on discipline, precision, and intellectual rigor. But today, something cracked inside him. How had a man with no formal training walked into his room and taught the class something he never could? Not formulas, not facts, but meaning. Mr. Cole rubbed his temples. He thought, back to his own childhood, his own failures, his own father who never believed in him. He remembered the day he first solved a complex equation on his own and how no one had noticed. Suddenly, he understood something. Keanu hadn't come to challenge him. He had come to remind him of who he once was, a new day. The next morning, the atmosphere in the classroom was different. Students talked in hushed tones, sharing stories about what had happened. Lucas walked in with his shoulders a little higher. Even Mr. Cole seemed quieter. When the bell rang, Mr. Cole stood in front of the class. Yesterday, he said, I saw something I didn't expect, and it humbled me. He looked around the room, meeting their eyes. Learning isn't just about solving equations, it's about believing you can. A pause. From now on, he continued, we're going to learn differently. Students glanced at each other, surprised. We'll still study physics, he said, but we'll also ask why it matters. The room was still. Something had shifted. Lucas raised his hand. Sir, he said, voice stronger than before. Will Keanu come back? Mr. Cole smiled faintly. I don't know, he said, but I hope he does. Somewhere on the road, Keanu Reeves drove alone down a quiet highway, sun setting behind him. He had no destination, just a purpose. He wasn't trying to be a teacher. He was trying to be a light for one student, for one classroom, for one moment, because sometimes that's all it takes. And as the horizon stretched out before him, he knew this was only the beginning. The whisper of doubt, the rain tapped gently on the windows as clouds rolled over the sleepy town. Inside the classroom, the chairs sat empty, the whiteboard erased clean, but something lingered, an invisible weight in the air. Yesterday had changed everything. Lucas sat at the kitchen table with his books open, a half-finished bowl of cereal pushed aside. His mother watched him from the sink, surprised. Usually he never studied in the morning, but today there was a glow in his eyes, A spark, one that had been missing for years. "You okay, baby?" she asked softly. Lucas nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." He didn't tell her everything. Not about Keanu. Not yet. Some moments felt too big to explain. Meanwhile, at school, Cole stood at the board, marker in hand, staring at a blank space. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel sure of himself. His routine had been shattered. His belief in strict control and cold logic had been shaken by a man who never raised his voice. He remembered Keanu's face. Calm. Honest. Filled with something deeper than intelligence. Wisdom. Today, he would teach differently. He just didn't know how. Students began to filter into the classroom, their laughter softer than usual, their steps slower. They looked at Mr. Cole with curiosity, some even with hope. Maybe he had changed. Maybe this wasn't going to be just another boring day of physics. Lucas came in last. He sat near the middle this time, not hiding in the back. That small shift said everything. Across town, Keanu was still there. He hadn't left. Not yet. He sat in the public library, hidden between shelves, reading an old textbook on quantum mechanics. He didn't need to, but he wanted to. Not because he was proving anything to anyone, but because knowledge still made him feel alive. A soft voice interrupted him. "Mr. Reeves?" He looked up. A young girl stood there, maybe 17, holding a notebook close to her chest. She looked nervous. "Are you really him?" He smiled kindly. "That depends. Who do you think I am?" She laughed quietly. "I think you're the guy who made my brother believe in himself again." Keanu closed the book. "Your brother?" "Lucas," she said. Keanu nodded slowly. "He came home yesterday." "Different," she whispered. He didn't say much, but I could tell something had changed. There was a pause. "Thank you." Keanu's smile faded into something softer. He stood and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "He changed himself," he said. I just reminded him it was possible. Back in class, Cole stood before the board, marker uncapped, heart racing. "Today," he said, "we won't start with a formula." Students blinked, surprised. "Instead, I want each of you to write down one question about the world that you've always wondered." The class fell into a quiet hum as pencils scratched paper. The questions were simple, innocent, strange. Why do stars twinkle? Why does time feel faster when we're happy? Why do some people just get it and others don't? Mr. Cole read each one aloud. Some students laughed, others grew quiet. Lucas's question was last. "Can someone like me ever become a scientist?" Mr. Cole held the paper for a long moment. Then, without speaking, he taped it to the board. "This," he said, "is why we're here." The room was silent. Then slowly, one by one, the students began to clap. But not everyone was happy. In the teacher's lounge, whispers floated like smoke. He let a movie star take over his class? This is a school, not a theater. What? If parents complain? One teacher, Ms. Hartley, shook her head. "I don't care who he is, Cole should have known better." Mr. Cole walked in just in time to hear. He paused, then spoke clearly. "Sometimes it takes a stranger to remind you who you are." The lounge went quiet. That evening, Keanu sat in the school parking lot in a borrowed car, engine off, staring out at the fading sun. He hadn't planned to return. He didn't want to make this about him, but then he saw something. Lucas, standing by himself under the old oak tree behind the school, staring at a notebook in his hands, shaking slightly. Keanu stepped out of the car and walked toward him. Lucas looked up, startled. "You okay?" Keanu asked gently. Lucas hesitated. "They're doing tryouts," he said quietly, "for the state science competition. Mr. Cole said I should enter, but what if I fail?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He knelt down and picked up a dry leaf from the ground. "You see this?" he asked. Lucas nodded. "Most people would step on it, throw it away." But do you know how much work nature put into this? Lucas frowned. It's just a leaf. No, Keanu said. It's a miracle. He crumbled the leaf gently between his fingers. Failure isn't falling, he said. It's refusing to get up again. Lucas looked away, fighting back emotion. You've already won, Keanu said. Because you're still standing. Inside Mr. Cole's home that night, the teacher sat alone at his kitchen table, staring at a stack of old report cards. One of them had his name on it, a faded document from when he was Lucas's age. Red marks covered the page. Poor performance in mathematics, shows little potential in science. He ran his fingers over the words. For years, he had taught with authority. But now, he realized he had taught from pain, from fear, from a need to prove himself to people who no longer mattered. Keanu's visit had opened something in him, something he wasn't ready to face. Until now. The twist the next morning, the school principal called Keanu into the office. We appreciate your visit, she said, but some parents are concerned. They think this may be turning into a publicity stunt. Keanu's face didn't change. You're welcome to visit, of course, she added. Just stay in the background. Keanu nodded politely, but inside something hurt. He had never wanted fame, not like this. He had come to help, to listen, to remind. But the world was full of people who couldn't see kindness without suspicion. He left the office and walked down the hall, unsure what to do next. Lucas gets a challenge in class that day. Mr. Cole drew a fresh equation on the board. It was complex, intimidating. This, he said, is the entrance problem for the science competition. No one volunteered. Then Lucas raised his hand. A wave of surprise swept through the class. He stood and walked to the board. His hands trembled, but his eyes were steady. Step by step, he began solving it. He got stuck halfway, made a mistake, paused, then tried again. The class held its breath. Finally, he reached the answer. Silence. Then, from the back of the room, a slow, steady clap. It was Keanu. He had been watching from the doorway. Lucas turned, and their eyes met. No words, just understanding. In the shadows, but not far away, someone else was watching. Ms. Hartley stood near the teacher's lounge, arms crossed. She didn't like what was happening. She had worked hard for her reputation. She believed in structure, control, and limits. And this chaos, this inspiration, it threatened everything. And she wasn't going to let that happen. Later that day, Keanu sat with Mr. Cole outside the school on a wooden bench. They watched the students run across the field, their laughter rising into the air. You were right, Mr. Cole said, about everything. Keanu shook his head. I wasn't trying to be right, he said. I was trying to be real. The teacher nodded slowly. I used to love physics, he whispered. Not for the grades, but for the wonder. Somewhere, along the way, I lost that. Then maybe, Keanu said softly, it's time to find it again. A long silence passed. Then Mr. Cole asked, do you ever feel like you're too broken to make a difference? Keanu looked up at the sky. Broken people, he said, make the best teachers, because they know how it feels to be put back together. The spark catches news spread fast. Lucas's performance on the equation earned him a spot in the state science competition. Students started to believe maybe they could enter too. One by one, a culture began to shift, not because of fear, but because of belief. And behind it all was Keanu Reeves. Not a hero, not a celebrity, just a man who once sat in the back of a classroom, wondering if anyone would ever see him. Now he made sure no one else felt invisible. A storm in the hallway. The school had changed. There was a new kind of energy in the air, quiet but powerful. Students who once dragged their feet through the halls now walked with purpose. Kids who used to keep their heads down now raised their hands in class. Lucas had started something, and Keanu had sparked it, but not everyone liked the change. Mrs. Hartley stood at the edge of the staff meeting that morning, arms crossed, lips tight. "I understand the impact he's made," she said, voice sharp. "But this is a school, not a stage. We cannot let a celebrity walk in and rewrite how we teach." Mr. Cole sat across from her, calm but firm. "He's not here to perform," he said. "He's here to help. We have rules," she insisted. The principal looked uneasy. "The school board is asking questions. There's pressure from some parents. They think this is about fame." Cole looked around the room. "If inspiration is dangerous, then maybe we've built our school on the wrong foundation." The room went quiet. Across the hall, Lucas sat alone, his fingers tapped nervously on the desk. The big science competition was only 2 weeks away, and suddenly the pressure felt real. Too real. Other students looked at him differently now. Some admired him, others not so much. A boy named Darren, tall and confident, smirked from the back of the room. "Guess it helps when a Hollywood actor solves your homework for you," Darren said loudly. Lucas looked up, stung. "I did it myself," he replied, quietly. Darren laughed. "Sure you did?" The words cut deep. Lucas looked down at his notebook. The numbers blurred. The old fear returned. Maybe he wasn't smart. Maybe they were right. But in his pocket was a small folded note. He pulled it out. It was from Keanu. "You don't have to prove anything to them. Just prove it to yourself." Lucas read it again and again. Meanwhile, Keanu was watching from a distance. He sat on a park bench across from the school, sunglasses on, hoodie up. He knew his presence stirred trouble. Some people wanted him gone, but he also knew something else. He couldn't leave. Not yet. He watched Lucas walk home that afternoon, shoulders slumped. Something was wrong. Keanu followed at a distance, careful not to be seen. Lucas walked past the same alleyway he always did. But this time a group of kids stepped out, Darren and his friends. "Hey, genius," Darren said, blocking the path. "Teach us some science." Lucas froze. "What's wrong?" one boy sneered. "Forgot your cheat sheet?" Lucas backed away. He looked scared, trapped. Keanu stepped forward. "That's enough." The boys turned. Keanu pulled down his hood. The look on his face was calm, but there was steel behind his eyes. "Walk away," he said. Darren scoffed. "Or what?" Keanu didn't flinch. "Or you'll regret it. Not because of what I do, but because of what you'll become." The silence was heavy. Darren's smile faded. Slowly he turned and walked off. The others followed. Lucas looked at Keanu, wide-eyed. "Why did you follow me?" "Because I remember what it feels like," Keanu said. "To walk home with fear in your chest." Lucas swallowed hard. "Thank you." Keanu nodded. "You won't always need saving. One day, you'll be the one who stands up." A breakthrough. In class the next morning, Lucas sat beside Mr. Cole after class. He opened his notebook and showed him a new formula he'd been working on. "I think, if you adjust the constant here, you can map the pattern of decay more accurately," Lucas said. Mr. Cole leaned in, studied the page. He looked up, amazed. "Lucas," he said, "this is brilliant." Lucas blinked. No one had ever used that word with him before. "Do you want to present this at the competition?" Mr. Cole asked. Lucas hesitated. "Do you think I can?" Mr. Cole smiled. "I think the world is about to find out." But Ms. Hartley was planning something else. She had contacted a local reporter. "He's interfering with education," she told them. "Students are being distracted. A celebrity has no place here." The reporter listened with interest. "You're saying Keanu Reeves is coaching students? In secret?" She nodded. "It's a problem." But what she didn't know was that the same reporter had a younger brother in Mr. Cole's class, and that boy had gone from failing to passing ever since Keanu showed up. A letter arrives. Keanu returned to the small guest house he was staying in. A white envelope lay at the door. He opened it. Inside was a short letter from Lucas. "You don't know what you've done for me. Even if the world forgets this, I won't." Thank you for not walking away. Keanu read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and tucked it into his bag. He didn't cry, but something in his chest softened. Lucas's confidence grows. Over the next week, Lucas transformed. He walked taller. He answered more in class. He stayed after school, working with other students who had questions. Some started calling him Professor. He laughed, embarrassed, but proud. Even Darren stopped bothering him. Once, he even nodded at him in the hallway. Small steps, big changes, and the competition was just days away. Mr. Cole's surprise. 2 days before the competition, Mr. Cole gathered the class. "I've decided something," he said. "We're taking a field trip." The students blinked. "Where?" one girl asked. "The Science Museum downtown." "I've rented a bus," Lucas raised his hand. "What for?" "Because it's time we remembered why we started this," Cole said. "Science isn't just numbers, it's wonder." The bus ride was filled with laughter and music. For once, everyone was together, not just as students, but as dreamers. The museum. They touched models of space shuttles, walked through exhibits on the brain, and marveled at a holographic display of black holes. Lucas stood in front of one exhibit and whispered, "I want to do this forever." Keanu, who had quietly joined the trip, smiled from a few steps behind. "Then you will," he said. But the storm wasn't over yet that night. The news ran a headline. Actor Keanu Reeves accused of interfering in school education system. The article featured quotes from Ms. Hartley. It painted him as a man trying to push his influence into places he didn't belong. Parents began calling the school, some angry, some confused. The principal called a meeting. "We may need to ask him to leave," she said carefully. Mr. Cole stood up. "If he leaves," he said, "so do I." Everyone froze. Lucas speaks up the next day. Lucas walked into the principal's office with a folder in hand. Inside were letters, dozens of them, from students, each one thanking Keanu for what he had done, for making them believe, for showing them kindness, for listening. The principal read them in silence, then she looked at Lucas. "Why did you bring these?" Lucas answered quietly, "Because sometimes the loudest voices aren't the ones that matter most." Competition day arrives. The auditorium was filled with students from across the state. Judges sat at the front. Lights were bright, tension high. Lucas stood backstage holding his notes, heart pounding. Mr. Cole adjusted his tie beside him. Nervous. Lucas nodded. "Good," Cole said. "That means you care." Keanu stepped forward from the shadows. "Remember," he whispered, "you're not here to impress them. You're here to express yourself." Lucas nodded again, then walked on stage. His voice shook at first, but as he explained his formula, something happened. The numbers became stories. The variables became emotions. And the room grew quiet. Judges leaned forward. Students listened. And for the first time, Lucas didn't feel like a boy pretending to be smart. He felt like someone who belonged. After the presentation, the judges clapped. Not politely. Genuinely. Lucas stepped down, trembling, but smiling. Keanu met him at the side. "You did it." Lucas shook his head. "We did." But in the back of the room, someone else stood watching. Ms. Hartley. For the first time, even she looked unsure. The results and the reckoning. The school gym had been decorated with banners, streamers, and folding. Chairs set in neat rows. Everyone was waiting. The science competition had ended 3 days ago, and today the results would be announced. Students whispered excitedly in the hallway, their voices bouncing off the lockers. For the first time in a long time, the school felt alive. Lucas sat quietly near the front of the gym, holding a folded piece of paper in his lap. It wasn't his notes or his speech. It was a letter he had written the night before. Not to anyone in particular, just words he needed to say. "Thank you, I am not the same anymore. I am not afraid of the future." Across the gym. Mr. Cole adjusted his tie and looked at Keanu, who stood near the exit, half in the shadow, as if still deciding whether to stay. "They think you changed the school?" Cole said softly. Keanu glanced sideways. "Did I?" Cole smiled. "You reminded us we could." The announcement, a hush, fell over the gym as the principal stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I am proud to announce that one of our own students placed in the top 3 at the state science competition." Applause erupted, but everyone leaned forward, waiting for the name. "Third place goes to Lucas Jennings." The gym exploded with cheers. Lucas sat frozen for a moment, the words echoing in his head. He stood slowly, overwhelmed, and made his way to the stage. As he walked, students stood. Some clapped, some shouted his name, others held back tears. Lucas turned toward the crowd and took the microphone. His hands shook, but his voice was clear. "I used to think I didn't belong in places like this," he said. "I thought maybe some people were born smart and others just weren't." He paused. "But someone taught me that it's not about being the smartest. It's about not giving up. It's about asking why, even when no one answers." Then he looked toward Keanu. "And sometimes it's about having someone believe in you before you can believe in yourself." A private moment after the ceremony, Lucas found Keanu outside near the bike racks. "I don't know how to say thank you," Lucas said. Keanu turned. "You already did. Do you think I could be, a scientist someday?" Keanu looked at him with that quiet intensity. "I don't think," he said. "I know, Ed." They stood there in silence for a while, watching the sky shift from blue to orange. "Will you stay?" Lucas asked. Keanu didn't answer right away. "I can't stay forever," he said. "But the things that matter, they stay with you. Always." Lucas nodded. He understood. But the conflict wasn't over in the teacher's lounge the next morning. Mrs. Hartley was fuming. "So we're just letting this continue?" she said. "We're letting students think a Hollywood actor can do our job better than us?" Mr. Cole stayed calm. "They don't think that. They think someone listened. That's all." "We're professionals," she snapped. "We earned our roles." He just walked in off the street. Cole sighed. "Maybe that's the problem. He walked in because none of us did." The room went quiet. Cole stood up and left without another word. Ms. Hartley takes a step. That afternoon, Ms. Hartley found Lucas in the library. He flinched when he saw her. "I'm not here to lecture you," she said. Lucas didn't respond. She hesitated, then sat beside him. "I've been teaching a long time," she said slowly. "Sometimes the longer you do something, the more afraid you get to change." Lucas looked at her. "I want to understand," she said. "Can you show me the formula you used at the competition?" His eyes widened. "You really want to see it?" She nodded. Lucas opened his notebook and began to explain. As he spoke, Ms. Hartley listened, and for the first time in years, she felt like a student again. Keanu's secret past revealed that night. Mr. Cole invited Keanu to dinner at his house. Over simple pasta and tea, they spoke like old friends. "There's something I've never told anyone," Keanu said quietly. "What is it?" Cole asked. Keanu pulled out a faded photograph from his pocket. It showed a young boy sitting alone on the steps of a school building. "That's me," he said. 11 years old, I was told I wouldn't graduate." Cole looked at him, shocked. "But I did," Keanu continued, "and I didn't stop learning. I never stopped." He looked at Cole. "I never had a teacher like you. But Lucas does. And that makes all the difference." Cole was silent for a moment, then raised his glass. "To the students we once were," he said, "and to the ones we teach now." An unexpected turn. The next morning, news broke online. KeanuReeves inspires struggling student to win state science award. The article went viral. Comments poured in from all over the world. "I wish I had someone like Keanu in my school." This story brought me to tears. Keanu, once again proving he's the best human alive. The school's phone rang nonstop. But this time, people weren't angry. They were grateful. The school board responds. A special meeting was held. The principal stood in front of the board members, reading letters from students and parents alike. One letter read, "This man gave my daughter hope. He reminded her that her mind is worth something." Another said, "My son talks about school for the first time in years. Please don't take that away from him." After a long silence, the board voted. Keanu would not only be allowed to stay, but invited to speak at schools across the district. He was stunned. He never wanted recognition, but he had earned respect, and that was enough. Lucas finds his voice. A few days later, Lucas was invited to speak at a youth event. He stood nervously backstage, watching other kids talk about sports, music, and travel. When it was his turn, he stepped onto the stage, heart pounding. "I used to think science wasn't for people like me," he said. "But now I know the truth." He looked out at the crowd. Science is for anyone who asks why. And if you've ever felt like the dumbest kid in the room, trust me, that's where genius begins. The room burst into applause. His mother, sitting in the front row, wiped tears from her eyes. Keanu prepares to leave. He walked the halls of the school one last time, remembering the faces, the moments, the lessons. Some taught, others learned. He stopped by the whiteboard in Mr. Cole's class. In the corner, a small equation remained. It was Lucas's. Keanu picked up the marker and added one final line beneath it. "Keep asking why." Then he placed the marker down and walked out. But before he left town, he visited Lucas's home. They sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting. The sky in colors no photograph could capture. "Promise me one thing," Keanu said. "Anything," Lucas replied. "When you get where you're going, don't forget to reach back." Lucas nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I won't." And as the road stretched out before him, Keanu drove in silence. No music, no noise, just the hum of the tires and the weight of everything he had witnessed. He didn't need cameras. He didn't need awards. He just needed to know one thing, that, somewhere, a boy who once felt invisible now saw himself as brilliant. Shadows before the sunrise, the town slept quietly beneath a soft blanket of morning fog. Streetlights flickered as the first rays of sunlight pushed gently through the clouds. Inside Lucas's room, a light was already on. He sat at his desk, headphones around his neck, pages of notes spread out in front of him. His eyes were tired, but focused. He wasn't just studying anymore, he was building something. Designing something, something he wanted to share with the world. A project. A real one. A simple device to help visually impaired students interact with math formulas using voice-guided feedback. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was real, and it was his. Outside the door, his sister peeked in. "You've been up all night again." Lucas smiled. "I couldn't stop thinking. I feel like I can finally do something that matters." She walked in and sat on the edge of his bed. "You already have." At school, the energy continued to grow. Students were different now. Not louder, not wilder, just more alive. They cared. They shared ideas between classes. They helped each other with problems. Even the ones who had never raised their hands before now asked questions that mattered. Why does time slow down in gravity? How do we know black holes exist? Why do we care about anything we can't see? Teachers began to adapt. More time for discussion, more room for curiosity, and more importantly, more compassion. In the middle of it all, Lucas had become something no one expected, a leader. But in the background, trouble was brewing. A powerful donor to the school board had seen the viral story about Keanu. He wasn't impressed. "Education is not a playground for actors," he said in a tense video call with the principal. "You're building a cult of personality. It's not sustainable." The principal, usually cautious, now found herself torn. "But the students are impressionable," he snapped. "You want funding for that new science lab? Then you do it the right way." The call ended, and the pressure returned. A confrontation. 2 days later, Keanu received a message asking him to meet the donor in person. He agreed. They met in a glass office above the city, surrounded by skyscrapers and silence. The donor was tall, polished, with eyes that measured everything. "I don't care how famous you are," he said. "You're disrupting a system that works." Keanu stood still, calm. "A system that works for who?" he asked softly. The man leaned forward. "This isn't about hope. It's about results." Keanu looked him in the eye. "Results without hope are empty." The man stood. "You're not a teacher." Keanu nodded. "Maybe not. But I am someone who knows what it feels like to be unseen. The room fell quiet. Then the man turned away. "I'll be watching." Keanu walked out without another word. Back at school, Lucas hits a wall. His device had a problem. It kept misreading numbers when tested out loud. The audio feedback glitched, reversing outputs. Lucas tried everything, rewriting the code, adjusting the sensors, starting over. Nothing worked. He stayed after school late into the evening, alone in the lab, frustration mounting. He slammed his notebook shut and whispered, "Maybe I'm not smart enough for this." From the doorway, Mr. Cole appeared. "You know," he said gently, "you don't have to do this alone." Lucas looked up, surprised. "You really think I can finish it?" Cole walked over and sat beside him. "You've already finished something most people never start." You believed. They began to work together, quietly, patiently, step by step. And, for the first time, Lucas understood that failure wasn't the end of the road. It was part of the path. The turning point 1 week later, Lucas's revised prototype worked. He tested it on a blindfolded student. The student smiled. "I can feel the formula." That sentence alone made it worth everything. Word spread quickly. The local newspaper ran a piece on Lucas's invention. Then a science tech blogger picked it up. Then a youth innovation group reached out asking Lucas to present at a regional expo. He couldn't believe it, but part of him still whispered doubt. He turned to Keanu, who had quietly come to congratulate him. "What if I freeze on stage? What if they ask questions I can't answer?" Keanu looked at him kindly. "You don't need to know everything," he said. "You just need to be honest." Lucas nodded. "Then I'll try." "No," Keanu said gently. "You'll do." A surprise guest the day of the expo arrived. Lucas stood backstage at the university auditorium, surrounded by student inventors from across the state. Some were older, more experienced, with polished presentations and confident smiles. He felt small again. But then someone tapped him on the shoulder. It was Ms. Hartley. Lucas blinked. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you speak," she said softly. "And to say I was wrong." Lucas's eyes widened. "I forgot what it meant to believe in someone," she admitted. "You reminded me." Lucas didn't know what to say, so he just smiled. On stage, Lucas shared his project. He didn't read from a script. He spoke from the heart. He told them about fear, about doubt, about being overlooked and underestimated. And then, he showed them what he built. Not just the device, but the meaning behind it. Some kids struggle with numbers. Some kids can't see them at all. But everyone deserves to understand. When he finished, the crowd stood. Not because of the tech, but because of the truth. An offer arrives after the event. A woman approached him. "I work with a startup that develops accessible learning tools," she said. "We'd like to invite you to join our youth advisory board." Lucas nearly dropped his notebook. "Me?" "Yes," she smiled. "Your voice matters." Lucas looked around. Keanu, Mr. Cole, Ms. Hartley, each standing in the back, watching. Proudly, he nodded. "Okay." A phone call later that evening, Lucas's mom received a call. "Mrs. Jennings, this is the governor's office. We'd like to invite your son to a special ceremony honoring young innovators." She nearly dropped the phone. Lucas stared at her as she told him. "Me," he whispered. "You," she said, pulling him into a hug. And for the first time he cried. Not because he was sad, because he finally believed he was enough. A goodbye. Or maybe not. Keanu stood at the school gate 2 mornings later, a small bag over his shoulder. Lucas ran up to him. "Are you leaving?" Keanu smiled softly. "My part's done. But there's so much more." Keanu raised a hand gently. "You've got this now. The story is yours." Lucas nodded slowly, then hugged him. Not like a fan, like a friend. Keanu stepped back. "Remember," he said, "you don't have to be perfect, just present." Then he turned and walked away. But just before he disappeared around the corner, a little voice shouted from across the schoolyard. "Thank you." It was a younger boy, one of the quiet kids. He waved shyly, and Keanu raised a hand in return. No words, just gratitude. Later that night, Lucas wrote in his journal, "I used to think school was about grades. Now I know it's about growth. I used to think genius was about knowing everything. Now I know it's about never giving up. I used to feel invisible. Now I feel seen." And in the sky above the quiet town, a single star burned a little brighter. Because somewhere out there, a boy once broken by doubt had built something beautiful from the pieces, and the world had finally noticed. The final lesson, the school buzzed with life that morning. Posters with Lucas's face were taped to the walls. "Congratulations, Lucas," handwritten by classmates in thick black marker. The hallway was filled with laughter, high fives, and whispers about the ceremony happening later that week. Lucas walked quietly through the center of it all, his backpack slung over one shoulder, a little overwhelmed by the attention. Not long ago, he had been the quiet boy in the back row. Now everyone seemed to know his name. But something deeper had changed too. He no longer looked down when he walked. He no longer doubted his place in the world. The governor's ceremony, on a stage built beneath a wide blue sky, young innovators stood, in line, each called forward one by one. Lucas waited near the end, his heart beating fast, hands cold despite the warm afternoon sun. "And now," the announcer said, "please welcome Lucas Jennings, recognized for his groundbreaking work in accessible learning technology." Applause rolled across the courtyard. Lucas stepped forward, his knees trembling slightly but his eyes steady. The governor shook his hand and handed him a certificate. Lucas looked down at the polished gold seal. Then, without a script, without fear, he turned toward the crowd. "This award isn't just mine," he said. "It belongs to every student who ever felt invisible, every kid who's been told they aren't smart, every quiet voice in a loud world." He paused. "I used to think someone like me couldn't stand here, but now I know it's not about where you start, it's about who stands with you." A ripple effect back at school. Something unexpected happened. Other students began creating projects. Small inventions. Ideas scribbled into action. One girl designed an app that translated speech into sign language. A boy started a tutoring club for kids who struggled with reading, and the school decided to start an idea lab, a space where students could experiment, create and collaborate without pressure. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it had begun with Lucas. A letter arrives weeks past. Lucas's life found a rhythm again. Homework, classes, late-night project tweaks. But then, one afternoon, a brown envelope appeared in his locker. No return address, just his name in smooth, quiet handwriting. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature, just one line. "The real equation is the one you write with your life." Beneath it was a pressed leaf, dry, golden, familiar. Lucas smiled. He didn't need to guess who it was from. A reunion months later, the school hosted a student showcase. Parents, teachers, even some university professors came to see the project students had developed. Lucas stood by his table, demonstrating the newest version of his device. This one was lighter, faster, and connected to an app he built with help from a college mentor. People nodded, asked questions, took notes. But then, from across the room, he saw him, Keanu, standing near the doorway, watching silently. Lucas rushed. "Over." "You came back." Keanu smiled. "I never really left." They stepped outside, away from the crowd. "Things are amazing," Lucas said, laughing. "I mean, sometimes I still get scared. But I'm not scared of being scared anymore." Keanu nodded. "That's called growth." Lucas paused, then looked up. "Why me? Why did you come to that classroom that day?" Keanu took a deep breath. "Because someone once believed in me when I didn't believe in myself," he said. "And I promised I'd pass that on, one person at a time." He looked at Lucas. "Now it's your turn." Lucas pays it forward the next semester. Lucas started volunteering at a community center. He taught kids basic coding, showed them how to build simple science experiments with everyday objects. One boy reminded him of himself. Quiet, uncertain, full of questions he was afraid to ask. Lucas knelt beside him and said, "You don't need to know everything right now, just stay curious." The boy smiled, and Lucas felt something shift inside. A new chapter beginning. A voice heard around the world. A few weeks later, a video of Lucas's expo speech went viral. Again, but this time it reached farther. International science programs reached out. Educational nonprofits wanted to collaborate. Journalists asked for interviews. But Lucas stayed grounded. He gave credit to his teachers. He spoke about kindness, and he always mentioned Keanu, not as a movie star. As a mentor, one more classroom years passed. Lucas, now a young man, walked into a lecture hall as a guest speaker at a university. He wore a simple jacket, carried a small bag. The crowd was filled with students waiting to hear about his latest invention. He stood at the board, paused, then wrote one line. "What's the question that keeps you up at night?" He turned to face them. And just like that day when Keanu stood at his old school board, Lucas began to teach. Not with pride, but with humility. Not to impress, but to inspire. Keanu watches from afar somewhere, far from the city. Keanu sat by a quiet lake with a notebook in his hand. Birds chirped. Water lapped gently at the rocks. He smiled softly as he watched a video of Lucas speaking on his phone. He paused it halfway through, not because he'd seen enough, because he didn't need to see more. Lucas was more than fine. He was flying. The final equation: we think genius is a flash, a gift. But sometimes genius is a whisper, a question, a moment of courage in the middle of fear. Sometimes genius is just refusing to give up when no one else believes. And sometimes, all it takes is one person who chooses to stay behind after the bell rings and say, "You can do this," because maybe that's the real lesson. Not formulas, not facts, but faith. And so the classroom changes, not because the system changed, but because someone saw through it, because one boy stood up, and because one man chose to walk in. Not as a star, but as a light.